You stumble through the square past midnight, noble blood in your veins, and within minutes, you're seized. Not for treason. For being drunk in public, the same mistake a farmer makes without consequence. This is the Aztec Empire. Tenochtitlan, capital of 5 million people, where rank was supposed to mean protection. Here, it meant the opposite. The higher you climbed, slave to farmer, warrior to noble, noble to emperor, the less room the law gave you to fail. By the end, you'll understand why succeeding in this empire didn't make you safer. It made you a target. Level 1. The Slave. You sell yourself at the edge of the marketplace, where the canoes unload maize before the heat sets in and nobody looks up from their work. There is no auction here, no chains, no platform, no crowd. Just a scribe bored, efficient, who records a mark against your name and moves on to the next petitioner. That mark is the only thing that changes about you this morning. Your debt is now a number. And from this moment forward, you belong to the man who paid it off. You will work his fields, carry his water. Sleep where he tells you, eat what is left after his household has eaten first, and there will always be something left, because that is the arrangement. This is not unusual. Debt makes Tlakatin out of farmers every season, the moment a harvest fails or a tribute payment comes due before the crop does. The Florentine Codex, compiled decades later from the testimony of elders who lived through this system, describes a society where status could move in both directions inside a single lifetime. A person born free could end the year owned. A person born owned could end it free, the instant the debt was repaid in full. What the empire tracks, carefully, is the debt. What it does not bother to track is the rest of your life, only the count. And here is the part no scribe ever writes down, because it isn't his to record. If you have a child while you are bound, that child is born owing nothing. Not the debt, not the mark, not a single day of labor. The empire gave away tomorrow, because today cost it nothing. You will spend years repaying a number a clerk recorded faster than it takes to say your name out loud. Your son will walk past this same marketplace a free man one day, and never once wonder why he was spared what you were not. The count remembers you. It will not remember him. That is the first lesson of this empire, and it will not be the last one. What is taken from you here is never taken from everyone equally, and never for the same length of time. Level 2. The Farmer. A canoe glides across Lake Texcoco before the sun clears the mountains, low in the water under the weight of maize, bound for a collector who will already be waiting at the causeway. You built this chinampa yourself. Dredged the lake mud, layered it with reeds, staked it down until it held a floating island, technically, though it has not moved in your lifetime or your father's. The Kalpuli assigned you this plot, not sold it. Assigned it, and the difference matters more than it sounds. You can farm it, pass it to your children, build on it. What you cannot do is leave it empty. Records show the rule plainly. If a plot lies fallow for more than 2 years, the elders take it back and give it to someone who will use it. No appeal, no grace period extended twice. You learned this rule before you learned to swim. Everyone in the Kalpuli did, because the punishment isn't violent, isn't public, isn't even cruel in the way punishments elsewhere are. It is simply quiet. The land changes hands, and your name stops being attached to it, and nobody comes to explain why, so you do not rest. Not really. The chinampa needs tending in a way fields on dry land never do: drainage, replanting, the constant battle against water finding its way back in. And once the maize is counted, weighed, recorded, a portion goes to the Kalpuli's own obligations, and a portion travels further, into a tribute system that reaches all the way to Tenochtitlan, a city of perhaps 200,000 people who grow none of their own food. You have never seen that city, you have fed it for years. The count that mattered for the slave was a debt, paid once and erased. Your count never erases. It resets every season, and starts again from zero. This is not punishment. Nobody calls it that. It is simply how the system stays fed, and you are simply where the system begins. The land that keeps you alive is never fully yours. Stop tending it for 2 years, and it remembers the same way it has always remembered everyone who came before you, and forgot just as easily. Level 3. The Artisan. You bend over a tray of quetzal feathers, iridescent green shifting to gold depending on how the light hits them, feathers that traveled days to reach your workshop, from birds you will never see alive. Featherwork is not farming. You know this. Your hands are trained, your eye is trained, and the cloak taking shape under your fingers will be worth more, by any measure that matters in this city, than your neighbor's entire chinampa harvest for the year. That cloak will hang on the shoulders of a noble who has never met you and never will. You are still Masha Walton. The skill moves you sideways inside the hierarchy, better standing within the Kalpuli, perhaps a name spoken with a little more care than it once was. What it does not do is move you up. There is no count in this system where craftsmanship converts into rank. This is the part outsiders rarely understand about an empire built on tribute and conquest. A man's hands can be the most valuable thing in the marketplace, and still count for nothing where rank is decided. You finish the cloak before dusk falls over the lake. Someone else will deliver it to the palace district. Someone else will be thanked. If anyone is thanked at all, the artisan's name does not travel with the work. Some among the Meshawalton choose a different path entirely, not the workshop. The road long routes out past the valley, carrying goods toward cities that do not answer to Tenochtitlan, returning months later with stories nobody can fully verify. That path carries its own risks, the kind a featherworker never has to consider. But there is only one road that has ever converted a commoner's life into a noble's rank, regardless of where he was born or what he can build with his hands. It does not run through a workshop. It does not run through trade. It runs through a battlefield, a length of rope, and a stranger whose survival now determines the shape of your future. Level 4. The Merchant. The road you heard about in the workshop has a name, Pashteka. And before sunrise, you are already part of a column moving out past the edge of the valley, carrying bundles strapped tighter than your own bedding ever was. This is not a road for the cautious. Routes run through territory that does not answer to Tenochtitlan, through markets where your accent marks you a stranger before you say a word, through forests where a column can vanish and never be heard from again. You travel disguised some seasons, dressed as a local trader, your real cargo hidden beneath goods nobody would think to search. You carry goods. You also carry instructions that have nothing to do with trade: what to count at the border crossings, what to notice about a garrison's size, what to remember about a road's condition for someone back home who will never thank you publicly for noticing. The Empire does not call this spying, it calls it commerce with good eyesight. You return wealthier than almost anyone in your Kalpuli. Wealthier, some seasons, than minor nobility, your storerooms holding more cacao beans, the currency of this empire, than most nobles will see in a year. And it changes nothing about what you are. The law still counts you as Meshawalton. No court, no record, no ceremony moves a Pakteka's name into the registers where rank actually lives. You can build a house finer than your neighbors. You cannot build a title. This is the count that frustrates you most, not because it's cruel, but because it's consistent. Wealth was never the currency this empire uses to measure a man's place, and watching merchants grow rich for generations has not changed that once. There is only one count that converts directly into rank here, and it has nothing to do with the bundles on your back. It is paid on a battlefield, in bodies brought back breathing, not in cacao, not in jade, not in anything you have ever carried home across a border that was never really yours to cross safely. Level 5. The Warrior. The bundles you carried home are gone now, traded for something the Empire actually counts. You stand on a battlefield, gripping a stranger's wrist, and you are not trying to kill him. That distinction is the entire point. Every young man outside the noble class passes through the Telpakali basic military training, mandatory, no exceptions for wealth or trade connections. What happens after training is where the count finally starts working in your favor, if you survive long enough to let it. Rank here is not measured in kills. It is measured in captives brought back alive. The Codex Mendoza records this with unusual precision, specific numbers of captives required for specific ranks, a ladder written out in pictographs centuries before anyone outside this valley could read them. One capture moves you up, a second moves you further. The men who take 4 or more captives enter a tier most warriors never reach. Your training began years before this moment, drills at dawn, weapons practice that left your hands raw long before any of it mattered on a real field. The Telpakali did not teach you to want this. It simply made sure you were ready when the choice stopped being yours to make, so you do not aim for the kill. You aim for the grip the moment you close a hand around a wrist, and the man stops fighting, because he understands what capture means versus what death means, and one of those outcomes still lets him breathe tomorrow. This is the kind of war where survival serves the system on both sides of the blade. You bring him back. Someone records it your name, his capture, the count climbing by exactly one. What you don't know yet, standing here with your hands still aching from the grip, is that the war producing him will never run out of men like him. It is not designed to. Somewhere east of here, a city called Tlaxcala is doing the same thing to men like you, on a schedule both sides agreed to without ever calling it an agreement. The counting will follow you up through every rank that still lies ahead. It will simply change what it is counting. Level 6. The Eagle Noble. You strip off the clothes you wore yesterday, the ones that marked you Meshualtan since birth, and a steward hands you something you have never touched before. Feathers. A cloak woven for a rank that did not exist for you a season ago. 4 captives did this. The count finally crossed the line that separates commoner from noble, and crossed it permanently enough that even the priests stopped checking your lineage at the temple gate. You are Huey Tlatoani now, Eagle Noble. The Empire's rare proof that birth is not always destiny here, that a farmer's son can stand where a duke's son stands, provided he paid the same price in captives that the system demands from everyone climbing this particular ladder. Almost everyone, anyway. What the steward does not say, fastening the cloak at your shoulder, is that this rank was not given, it was loaned, against your next performance. The Pippleton born into their titles keep them regardless of what happens next on any battlefield. You do not have that guarantee. Your standing depends on a count that has to keep climbing, season after season, or risk sliding back toward where you started. This is not punishment for failure. It is simply how the system protects the value of noble blood by making sure the men who bought their way in keep paying the entry fee, indefinitely, in a currency that runs out the moment your knees stop being young enough for the field. There is a path that avoids this uncertainty entirely, a path that does not depend on what happens to your knees or your luck on any given field. It belongs to men who never set foot in a Tlaxcala at all. Men who were sorted, as children, into a different kind of training altogether, one that has nothing to do with captives, and everything to do with the calendar that governs every rank in this empire, including the one you just earned. You wear the feathers anyway. Tonight, at least, the count is in your favor. Nothing earned this way is permanent, not even when it's earned in blood, and not even close to as permanent as what comes next. Level 7. The Priest. In the dark of the temple, before dawn touches the lake outside, you trace the day count on a bark paper screen by torchlight checking, rechecking, because a single miscount here will ripple through every level of this empire by midday. The children sorted into this path were never asked. Their families chose for them before memory even starts. Kalmakak instead of Tlaxcala, ideology instead of captives, a different ladder entirely from the one you climbed in blood. You were one of them. And what you learned in that temple school was not how to fight. It was how to count days nobody else is permitted to count. The ritual calendar runs on 2 interlocking cycles, 260 days, 365 days, grinding against each other like gears that only realign once every 52 years. Miss a single calculation, and a ceremony falls on the wrong day. A planting season starts wrong. An offering happens out of sequence. And somewhere, a farmer below you reads that mistake as an omen about his harvest. You do not get to be wrong. This is the part nobody explains to a child entering Kalmakak, that controlling the calendar does not mean controlling time. It means becoming its servant, permanently, in a way no warrior or farmer ever has to be. The Quapapilton you trained beside in childhood now answers to captives. You answer to numbers that existed before either of you were born, and will keep existing long after. You administer the rituals. You oversee what the count below calls sacrifice, and what you have been trained to call obligation, a debt owed upward, the same way tribute flows upward from every Kalpuli in the valley. Nobody asks whether the gods actually require this. The question stopped being askable generations before you arrived. What you enforce, you also obey. The fasting days are not optional for you either. The bloodletting rituals draw your blood as readily as anyone's. Status in this temple buys you authority over commoners. It buys you nothing against the calendar itself. You enforce the calendar. You did not notice yet, it enforces you back, in ways the warriors below you, counting captives, will never have to understand. And above you, in a palace none of this temple's authority reaches, sits a man this same calendar governs even more completely than it governs you. Level 8. The Noble. You were born into this rank. No captives required, No calendar to master from childhood, just blood, and the land and tribute that come attached to it. Pippleton. The word itself means something close to children of someone, and that someone is always nobility. Tonight you drink more than you should at a gathering that started as a tribute celebration and stopped being careful sometime after midnight. You stumble through the square as the torches burn low. And within minutes, not days, not after a warning, not after a second chance, you are seized. Here is what the law actually says, and it inverts everything you assumed about power in this empire. A commoner caught drunk in public, outside the sanctioned ceremonies, faces punishment only on a second offense. A noble faces it on the first. The same crime, the same square. A sentence that arrives faster and lands harder the higher your blood sits. Francis Burden's research into Aztec law confirms what the legal codes themselves record. Sanctions varied sharply along class lines, and not in the direction most outsiders expect. Nobles, who were supposed to model the empire's standards, were punished more severely than the commoners watching them fail to meet those standards. This is the part that Cal Pippleton U outrank would find almost funny if it weren't also true for him. He earned his feathers through captives and still answers to a count that can strip them away. You were born into yours, and the count watching you is even less forgiving. The higher you rise in this empire, the less room you have to be human in public. Privilege was never a reward here, it was a standard, and the standard tightened with every rank you climbed until the men with the most to lose were also the men allowed the smallest margin for error. You will not make this mistake twice. There will not be a second time to make it. The sentence for a noble caught this way was severe enough that survivors of it were rare enough not to need a second telling. The empire did not whisper this rule. It enforced it in public, in the same square where the offense happened, so that every rank beneath you understood exactly what privilege actually cost. Privilege, in this empire, was never a gift. It was a sentence with better clothing, and the higher you climbed, the less of it the law was willing to forgive. Level 9. The Governor. You govern now. A province, tribute flowing through your hands before it ever reaches the capital, a title with Zin attached to mark the honor permanently. But governing this empire means administering something that has nothing to do with conquest, even though it looks like war from a distance. Two armies meet on a field east of the valley, on a day chosen in advance, in formations both sides understood before a single man stepped onto the ground. Neither side is trying to take the other's territory. Neither side particularly wants to. This is a flower war. Xochitl. A conflict scheduled the way, a tribute payment is scheduled, recurring, predictable, designed to produce exactly one thing: captives, harvested from both directions, feeding ceremonies on both sides of a border that never actually moves. One historian studying this region called it something closer to a stockyard than a battlefield. Not every scholar agrees with that framing. Some argue it oversimplifies a more complex set of political and religious motives layered into these conflicts. But the basic mechanism is not disputed. This was warfare that consumed men without ever resolving anything, on a schedule that outlasted any single emperor's reign. You administer your province's role in this: the tribute, the warriors sent, the captives received, and the captives surrendered, depending on which direction the calendar's schedule points this season. What the earliest accounts suggest is that this system did not start as brutal as it became. Some early captives, by certain records, were released back to their own side after a period of time exchanged rather than kept. Over generations, that practice hardened, the releases stopped. The system that once had an exit kept running anyway, because by then nobody below the emperor had the authority to stop a war that had never officially started in the first place. You did not design this, neither did the governor before you. Both of you simply kept the count moving, the way every rank below you has kept some count moving since the first slave sold himself at the edge of a marketplace you have never visited and never will. Above you, the man who could end this, who could, in theory, stop the count entirely, has never once done so. Level 10. The Emperor. You wake before dawn, not because you chose to. The calendar chose for you, the same one the priest, 2 ranks below, spends his life protecting from error, and even you. Huey Tlatoani, ruler of an empire stretching from coast to coast, do not get to override it. Every motion of your day was decided before you were born: which rituals you perform, which offerings you make, which direction you face when the sun reaches its height. The two interlocking cycles that govern this empire, 260 days, 365, do not pause for an emperor's preference. You are, on paper, the most powerful man 5 million people will ever answer to. You are also the one man in this entire hierarchy with no Kalpuli to return to, no captives left to take that would change your rank, no count left to climb. There is nowhere higher. Which means there is nowhere left to hide from the only count that has ever mattered here, the one the calendar keeps, whether you're watching or not. And here is the detail almost nobody below you knows, because it was never meant for them to know. The law that punished nobles harder than commoners, the one that seized your own cousin in the square that night, that law was not inherited, it was written. By an emperor much like you, generations back, who looked at his own nobility and decided the system needed its highest ranks held to its harshest standard, or the whole structure beneath them would stop believing privilege had been earned at all. You did not write that law. You inherited the empire it built, 5 million people, all of them counting something, all of them owing something upward, all of them believing, at every single level, that the rank above them carries less weight than it actually does. It does not. The slave who sold himself believed his master answered to no one. He answered to the Kalpuli. The Kalpuli answered to the tribute collectors. The collectors answered to the governor. The governor answered to the calendar's schedule for the next flower war. And you, Huey Tlatoani, the answer everyone assumes exists at the top of this answer to a calendar you did not write, enforced by a law you did not invent, in a system that started counting long before you arrived and will not stop the moment you leave it. You started at the edge of a marketplace, sold for a debt that was never fully yours, your only inheritance, a mark a scribe recorded without looking up. You end in a palace, ruler of 5 million people, bound by a calendar you did not write and a law you did not invent, answering to a count that started before you and will not stop when you're gone. Neither of you ever met, neither of you ever will, but both of you paid into the same system every single day of your life. Inside it, one in labor, one in liberty, neither one ever fully free of what the count demanded next. The cycle continues.